It's that moment right before sleep when your mind whispers the question you keep trying to bury. What am I actually doing with my time? And you push it down. You push it down every single time. Because answering that question honestly, that would require you to admit something you're not ready to face. But you clicked on this video, and that tells me something. That tells me the whisper is getting louder. That tells me you're tired, not physically tired, soul tired, tired of watching yourself repeat the same patterns, tired of knowing exactly what you should be doing and choosing not to do it, tired of living in that gap between who you are and who you were supposed to become. So stay with me, because what I'm about to walk you through in this video is going to change the way you see every single hour of your day. Not because I'm going to give you some productivity hack or a morning routine. Forget all that. What I'm going to show you is something the top 1% of people understand about time that the other 99% never figure out. And once you see it, once it clicks, you can't unsee it. It will rewire the way you move through your life. But first, I need you to be honest with yourself for the next few minutes. Brutally honest, because what comes next is going to sting. Let me describe your day. Tell me if I'm wrong. Your alarm goes off, and the very first thing you do before your feet hit the floor, before you take a conscious breath, before you've made a single intentional decision about your day, you reach for your phone. You check your notifications. You scroll through whatever's waiting. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, the news, texts, emails you have no intention of responding to yet. And just like that, before you've even stood up, you've already handed the first 10, 15, 20 minutes of your day to someone else's agenda, someone else's content, someone else's life, and you don't even think about it. That's the part that should scare you. You don't even think about it because it's so automatic, so deeply wired into your routine that it doesn't even feel like a choice anymore. It just happens, like breathing. But it is a choice, and it's the first of about 100 choices you'll make today that slowly, invisibly drain the hours from your life like water through a crack in a dam. You get ready for work. Maybe you eat breakfast. Maybe you don't. You drive or commute. And during that time, you're half listening to something, a podcast, music, the radio, but you're not really present. Your mind is already at work, already stressed, already behind before the day has even started. You get to work, and for the next 8, 9, 10 hours, you give your best energy, your sharpest thinking, your strongest focus to someone else's dream, to a company, to a paycheck, to a boss who might not even remember your name in 5 years. And look, I'm not saying quit your job. That's not the point. The point is, after you give those hours away, what do you do with the ones you get back? Let me say that again because I need it to land. After you give your best hours to someone else's vision, what are you doing with the hours that are supposed to be yours? The hours that belong to your dream, your growth, your future. What are you giving those hours to? Because that's where the real damage happens. Not at work. At work, you're at least producing something. You're at least getting paid. The real bleeding happens between 6 p.m. and midnight. The real loss happens on weekends. The real erosion happens in the hours that were supposed to be your salvation. The hours that could have been the foundation of a completely different life, but instead became the place where your potential goes to quietly suffocate. And nobody talks about this. Nobody sits you down and says, hey, those 4 hours after work, those are the most important hours of your life, not your work hours, not your sleep hours, those in-between hours. That's where futures are either built or buried. You come home, you're tired. Of course you're tired. And because you're tired, you feel like you've earned the right to shut off, to decompress, to do nothing. And so you sit down, you turn on the TV, or you open your laptop, or you pick up your phone, and you sink into that warm, comfortable fog of passive consumption. You watch, you scroll, you binge, you browse, and 2 hours disappear. 3 hours, 4 hours, gone. Evaporated into content you won't remember tomorrow, into videos that made you laugh for 12 seconds and then vanished from your mind forever, into conversations on social media that meant nothing with people you'll never meet, and then it's 11 p.m. or midnight or 1 a.m. and you're still on your phone, still scrolling, and that voice comes back, the one you tried to bury this morning, and it says the same thing it always says: I wasted another day. And you promise yourself tomorrow will be different. You set your alarm 5 minutes earlier. You tell yourself you'll wake up with purpose. You'll read, you'll exercise, you'll work on that thing you've been putting off for months, and then tomorrow comes, and it's the same, exactly the same. Not because you're weak, not because you're lazy, not because there's something wrong with you, but because you have never been taught how to see time the way the people who never waste it see time. Let me put this in perspective for you. And I need you to really sit with these numbers because they're gonna hit different when you do the math on your own life. The average person spends nearly 7 hours a day staring at a screen. 7 hours. That's not work. That's not building anything. That's scrolling, streaming, watching, consuming. 7 hours a day adds up to over 20 years of your life. 20 years gone, poured into a device that gives you nothing back except a shorter attention span and a growing sense that time is moving too fast. Let me put that number in a way that actually hits you. 20 years. That's enough time to master 5 different skills at a world-class level. That's enough time to build a business from nothing and watch it grow into something that changes your family's financial future for generations. That's enough time to write 10 books, to learn 3 languages, to get in the best shape of your life and stay there. 20 years is a lifetime inside a lifetime, and you're pouring it into a glowing rectangle that's designed, literally engineered by some of the smartest people on the planet to keep you watching, to keep you scrolling, to keep you numb. And here's what makes it even worse. A child born today is projected to spend 21 years of their entire life looking at a screen. 21 years not living, not creating, not loving or building or growing, just watching. We are raising a generation that will spend a quarter of their existence in a digital trance, and most of them will never even realize what they lost. Think about that. If someone told you right now, today, that you had 20 years to build anything you wanted, you would feel rich with time. You would feel like you had all the time in the world. But you do have that time. You have it right now. It's sitting in your hand. It's glowing in the dark at 11:30 p.m. while you scroll through reels of strangers living the life you wish you had. And that's the cruelty of it. You're watching other people build their dreams during the exact hours you could be building yours. You know what's wild? 82% of people don't use any kind of system to manage their time. 82%. That means the vast majority of human beings are walking through their days without any intentional structure. No plan, no priorities, no awareness of where the hours are actually going. They're just drifting, reacting, responding to whatever grabs their attention next, and then wondering why they feel like life is passing them by. It is passing them by because they never grabbed onto it in the first place. Now let me tell you about someone. I'm not going to use his real name. Let's call him David, because David could be anyone. David could be you. David was 27 years old, smart, talented. Everyone who knew him said the same thing. David's got so much potential, and he did. He was the kind of person who could pick up anything fast, give him a skill, give him a concept, give him a challenge, and he'd figure it out. Teachers loved him, friends admired him, his parents were proud of him. But David had a problem, and it wasn't drugs, it wasn't alcohol, it wasn't some dramatic downfall that would make a good movie. David's problem was invisible. David's problem was comfortable. David wasted time, not in any way he could see, not in any way anyone would call him out for. He went to work every day, he paid his rent, he showed up to dinners, he was by every normal standard doing fine. But every night, every single night, David would come home, sit on his couch, and disappear into his phone. He'd open YouTube, he'd watch one video, then another, then another. He'd switch to Instagram, then Reddit, then back to YouTube. And before he knew it, 4 hours had passed, sometimes 5. He'd look at the clock and feel that familiar pang of guilt. He'd think about the online course he bought 6 months ago, the one he'd completed exactly 2 lessons of. He'd think about the business idea he'd had, the one he told 3 friends about but never started. He'd think about the book he wanted to write. the guitar he wanted to learn, the body he wanted to build. And he'd tell himself the same thing he told himself every night. Tomorrow. You know that word? Tomorrow? That's the most dangerous word in the English language. Not because it's wrong, but because it feels so reasonable. Tomorrow sounds so close, so achievable, so harmless. But tomorrow is a lie, dressed up as a plan. Tomorrow is the favorite hiding spot of people who are terrified of starting today. And David lived inside that word. He built a whole life around it. Tomorrow became his religion, his safety net, his excuse that sounded like ambition. Months passed, then a year, then 2 years, then 5. David was 32, same apartment, same job, same couch, same routine, same tomorrow. And one night, one random, unremarkable Tuesday night, David was scrolling through Instagram and he saw a post from a guy he went to college with. This guy wasn't smarter than David, wasn't more talented, wasn't more connected, but this guy had started a business, a real one. It was thriving. He had a team. He was traveling. He was building something that mattered. And David stared at that post for a long time, and something cracked inside him, not broke, cracked, like a hairline fracture in glass that you can barely see, but you know if you press on it, the whole thing will shatter. Because it wasn't jealousy David felt, it was recognition. He recognized himself, not in his friend's success, but in the gap, the distance between what his friend had done with his time and what David had done with the same amount of time, the same 24 hours in a day, the same 5 years. But while David was consuming, his friend was creating. While David was watching, his friend was building. While David was scrolling through other people's highlight reels, his friend was writing his own. And it wasn't talent that separated them. It wasn't luck. It wasn't money or connections or some unfair advantage. It was what they did with the hours no one was watching. The hours that David spent on his couch, his friend spent learning. The hours David poured into YouTube rabbit holes. His friend poured into building something real. Not every night, not perfectly, not with some superhuman discipline that made it easy. There were nights his friend was tired too. Nights he wanted to quit. Nights he sat in his car after work and wondered if any of it was going to matter. But he showed up anyway. He gave those hours to his future instead of giving them to the algorithm. And 5 years later, the difference between those two choices was the difference between a life that felt like it was happening to you and a life that felt like it was happening because of you. That's where the 1% separates from everybody else. Not in the big dramatic moments, not in the grand gestures or the viral posts or the overnight success stories. The separation happens in the quiet hours, the 6 p.m. to midnight hours, the Saturday morning hours, the I'm tired but I could still give 30 minutes hours. The 1% treats those hours like they're sacred, like they're the most valuable currency on the planet, because they are. And everybody else treats those hours like spare change, like leftover scraps, like time that doesn't really count. But it all counts. Every minute counts. And the painful truth, the one that David realized on that random Tuesday night, is that the minutes you waste today don't just disappear. They compound, they stack, they become weeks, then months, then years, then decades of a life that could have been something extraordinary, but wasn't. Because you gave those minutes away, not to your dreams, not to your growth, not to the person you're capable of becoming. You gave them to an algorithm, to a feed, to a screen that doesn't know your name and doesn't care about your future. Here's where this starts to turn. Because if you're still listening, if you haven't clicked away, then that crack I talked about, the one David felt, you're feeling it right now. Something in you is shifting. Maybe it's small, maybe it's barely noticeable, but it's there. You can feel it. That restless, uncomfortable stirring in your chest that happens when the truth gets too close to ignore. And what I want you to do right now is sit with that feeling. Don't push it down. Don't distract yourself. Don't reach for your phone. Just be in it. Because that discomfort, that's the beginning of everything. See, most people think change starts with motivation, with some big inspiring moment that lights a fire and carries you forward. But that's not how it works. Not for the people who actually change. Not for the 1%. Change starts with pain. Real, honest, gut-level pain. The kind that comes when you finally stop lying to yourself about where your time is going. When you finally look at your life, really look at it, and say, I did this to myself, not my circumstances, not my schedule, not my boss, me. I chose this. Every night, every scroll, every too much start tomorrow. I chose this. That's the most terrifying sentence a human being can say. And it's also the most powerful. Because the moment you take ownership of how you've spent your time is the same moment you take ownership of how you'll spend it from here. You can't have one without the other. You can't build a new future while still blaming someone else for your past. And here's what the 1% knows, that nobody talks about. It was never about time management. It was never about productivity systems or morning routines or waking up at 5 a.m. Those things are tools. They're useful, but they're not the answer. The answer is something deeper, something most people will live their entire lives without understanding. And it has nothing to do with doing more. It has everything to do with seeing differently. The way you see time right now, the way you've been trained to see it, is fundamentally broken. And until someone shows you the fracture, you'll keep bleeding hours without ever knowing where they went. Think about it. You were raised in a world that taught you time is something you spend. How do you spend your time? That's the question. Right? We even use the same language we use for money. Spend, save, waste. But time is nothing like money. Money you can earn back. Money you can borrow. Money you can inherit or find or create from nothing. Time only moves in one direction. And it never, not once, not ever, gives you a refund. So what does that mean? It means every single framework you've been using to think about time is wrong. Every instinct you have about how to use your day is built on a foundation that's cracked. You've been trying to manage something you don't even understand yet. And that's why nothing has worked. That's why every system you've tried, every planner, every app, every routine eventually falls apart because you're treating the symptoms. You've never looked at the cause. The 1% doesn't spend time. They don't even manage it. They do something else entirely, something that would seem almost alien to the way you and I were raised to think. And what that something is going to fundamentally change the way you move through every single day. But I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. Not because I'm trying to play games with you, but because you're not ready for it yet. If I told you right now in this moment, with the mindset you currently have, it would bounce off you. You'd hear it, nod, think that's interesting, and go right back to the same patterns by Thursday. No, for this to land, for this to actually reach you in the place where real change happens, you need to understand one more thing first, one more layer, one more truth about yourself that nobody has had the guts to tell you. And that truth, it's the reason 99% of people will hear everything I just said, feel that fire for maybe an hour, maybe a day, and then slide right back into the same comfortable patterns that are slowly eating their lives. There's a reason you keep going back. There's a reason willpower hasn't worked. There's a reason every New Year's resolution, every fresh start Monday, every time you've promised yourself this time will be different, there's a reason it hasn't stuck. And it's not what you think. It has nothing to do with laziness, nothing to do with motivation, nothing to do with discipline. Not yet, at least. It has to do with something happening inside your mind that you don't even know is there. A pattern so deeply embedded, so perfectly disguised as normal that you can't see it. Like a fish that doesn't know it's in water. Like a person who's been wearing tinted glasses so long they've forgotten the world has different colors. You can't fight something you can't see, and right now, you can't see it. You think the problem is discipline. It's not. You think the problem is willpower. It's not. You think the problem is that you just need the right system, the right routine, the right hack that finally makes everything click. It's none of those things. The problem is a fundamental misunderstanding about what you are, what time is, and what happens at the intersection of the two. And until someone tears that misunderstanding out by the roots, you will keep planting the same broken seeds and wondering why nothing grows. But you will, because what comes next is going to pull that pattern into the light. And once you see it, once you truly understand what's been driving every wasted evening, every abandoned goal, every broken promise you've made to yourself, everything changes. Not because you suddenly become disciplined, but because you finally understand what discipline actually is. And I promise you, it's not what anyone has told you. The person you're going to be at the end of this is not the person listening right now. That's not motivation talking. That's not hype. That's what happens when someone finally shows you the thing you've been missing, and we're just getting started. Stay with me, because the next part of this is where the real shift begins, and you are not going to want to miss it. So here it is. The thing I've been building toward, the pattern you can't see. You don't have a discipline problem. You don't have a motivation problem. You don't have a time management problem. What you have is an identity problem. Let me explain, because this is the part where everything you thought you knew about changing your life gets flipped on its head. Every single night, when you sit down on that couch and pick up your phone, instead of working on the thing you said matters to you, you're not making a choice about what to do. You're making a choice about who to be. Every scroll is a vote. Every wasted hour is a ballot. And you've been voting consistently, relentlessly for years for the version of yourself that stays the same. You've been casting a vote for the person who watches instead of builds, who consumes instead of creates, who talks about starting instead of starting. And the terrifying thing is, you've won that election decisively. That version of you is now in office. It's running your life. And every time you try to override it with willpower or motivation or some new productivity system, that deeply embedded identity drags you right back to the couch, right back to the scroll, right back to tomorrow. This is why nothing has worked. Not because the systems were bad, not because you weren't trying hard enough, but because you were trying to change your behavior without changing who you believe you are. And behavior that contradicts your identity will never last. Never. It's like trying to run east while your compass is locked on west. You might force yourself forward for a day, a week, maybe even a month, but eventually, the pull of who you think you are will drag you right back to where you started. And that's the secret the 1% figured out that nobody talks about. They didn't start by changing what they do. They started by changing who they are. And I'm not talking about some self-help affirmation nonsense where you stare in the mirror and tell yourself you're a champion. I'm talking about something raw, something real, something that happens in the gut, not in the head. But before I show you how that shift actually works, before I give you the framework that will rewire the way you move through your hours, I need to tell you a story, because this can't live in theory. You need to see it in someone's real life. You need to see the moment it happened, the exact moment. And this story, this one's going to change you. There was a woman, let's call her Maria, 34 years old, single mother, 2 kids, working a customer service job she hated, pulling 10-hour shifts, coming home to a house that always needed something. Dishes, laundry, homework, lunches for tomorrow. By the time her kids were asleep, it was usually 9:30 p.m., and Maria was done, finished. Every ounce of energy wrung out of her like water from a rag. And here's what Maria did with those last 2 hours of her day. Every night for 4 years straight, she sat on her bed, she opened her phone, and she disappeared. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, online shopping. She couldn't afford. Videos of other women living lives that looked nothing like hers. Women with clean kitchens and successful businesses and vacations and relationships and freedom. And Maria would watch, and she'd feel that familiar ache in her chest. Not jealousy exactly. Something worse. Something that whispered, that's not for people like you. And she believed it. She believed it because everything in her life seemed to confirm it. She was tired. She was broke. She was alone. She had 2 kids depending on her. When was she supposed to build a business? When was she supposed to learn a new skill? When was she supposed to become someone different? The math didn't work. The hours weren't there. The energy wasn't there. The life she had didn't leave room for the life she wanted, or so she thought. One night, and I need you to picture this because the details matter, Maria was scrolling through Instagram at about 10:45 p.m. Her kids were asleep. The apartment was quiet, and she saw a reel of a woman about her age, also a single mother, talking about how she'd built a freelance graphic design business from her phone during her kids' nap times and after bedtime. The woman wasn't rich, she wasn't famous, she wasn't selling a course or pushing a product. She was just talking, honestly, about how she'd started with 2 hours a night. 2 hours. And Maria stopped scrolling. She didn't keep going. She didn't double tap and move on. She stopped, and she stared at the screen. And the voice in her head, the same one that had been whispering, "That's not for people like you," for years, said something different that night. It said, "She has 2 hours, you have 2 hours." And that thought hit Maria like a truck. Not because it was revolutionary, not because it was some profound piece of wisdom, but because it was undeniable. It was math, pure, brutal, unarguable math. This woman had the same number of hours, the same exhaustion, the same constraints, the same crushing weight of responsibility. And she'd done something with those hours that Maria had spent on a feed. Maria put her phone down that night, and she didn't sleep. Not because she was inspired, because she was angry, furious, at herself, at the years, at the 4 years of nights, roughly 1,400 nights, where she had 2 usable hours, and spent every single one of them numbing herself with a screen. 1,400 nights, 2,800 hours, 2,800 hours she could have spent learning something, building something, becoming someone. That anger, that raw, white-hot, gut-churning anger, that was the crack. That was the moment identity fractures and something new tries to push through. And Maria made a decision that night. Not a resolution, not a goal, not an "I'll try harder" starting Monday. She made a decision about who she was. She said out loud in her dark bedroom with tears running down her face, "I am not this person anymore." She didn't know what she was going to do yet. She didn't have a plan. She didn't have a mentor or a roadmap or a support system. All she had was a fracture in the identity that had been running her life. And that fracture was enough. The next night, after her kids were asleep, Maria sat down, and instead of opening Instagram, she opened YouTube, and she searched how to learn graphic design for free. And she watched one tutorial, 20 minutes. That's it. Then she went to bed. The night after that, she watched another one, and another, and another. And within 2 weeks, she was practicing on a free app on her phone while her kids did homework. Within 2 months, she designed a logo for a friend's small business for free because she didn't think she was good enough to charge yet. Within 5 months, she had 3 paying clients. Small jobs. $100 here, $200 there. Nothing life-changing. But that's not what mattered. What mattered is what happened inside her. Because somewhere between night 1 and month 5, Maria stopped being the woman on the couch. She stopped being the person who scrolled. She didn't have to fight the urge to open Instagram anymore. Not because she had superhuman willpower, but because it didn't fit. It didn't match who she now believed she was. She was a designer. She was building something. And designers don't spend their nights watching other people live. They create. That's the shift. That's what the 1% understands. You don't fight old behaviors, you outgrow them. You become someone for whom the old behavior simply doesn't make sense anymore. A person who sees themselves as a builder doesn't sit on the couch scrolling for 4 hours. Not because they're forcing themselves to resist, but because building is who they are. The pull isn't toward the screen anymore. The pull is toward the work. And here's the part that nobody tells you. That shift didn't require Maria to have more time. She had the same 24 hours, the same job, the same kids, the same exhaustion. What changed wasn't her schedule. What changed was her. She started seeing those 2 hours after bedtime not as recovery time, not as me time, but as building time, as the most sacred, valuable, non-negotiable hours of her day. The hours where her future was being written, one night at a time. Now, let me go deeper. Because Maria's story gives you the what, but you need the how. And the how is where most people get tripped up. Because they think discipline is what you do. It's not. Discipline is what you become. And there's a massive difference. Let me break this apart in a way that actually lands. You've been told your whole life that discipline means forcing yourself to do hard things. Waking up early, going to the gym, saying no to distractions, gritting your teeth and white-knuckling your way through discomfort. And sure, that's part of it, but that's the surface. That's the part everyone can see. What nobody shows you is the layer underneath, the layer that makes the surface possible. Discipline is not teeth gritting. Discipline is identity alignment. When Kobe Bryant woke up at 4 a.m. to train every single day for decades, people looked at that and said, wow, he's so disciplined. But that misses the entire point. Kobe didn't wake up at 4 a.m. because he was disciplined. He woke up at 4 a.m. because he was Kobe. Because in his mind, in his bones, in the deepest part of who he believed himself to be, he was the hardest working person on the planet. That wasn't a goal. That was his identity. And when your identity says, I am the person who outworks everyone, then waking up at 4 a.m. isn't discipline. It's just Tuesday. It's just what you do. The way you brush your teeth, the way you lock your door when you leave the house. He didn't train 6 hours a day because he forced himself. He trained 6 hours a day because anything less would have felt wrong, would have felt like a betrayal of who he was. Do you see the difference? For most people, discipline feels like pushing a boulder uphill. For the 1%, discipline feels like gravity, like falling in the direction they were always meant to go. So how do you get there? How do you go from someone who has to force themselves to put the phone down to someone who doesn't even want to pick it up? Here's where it gets practical. And I need you to listen closely because this isn't theory anymore. This is the blueprint. Step one. And this is the hardest step, but it's the only one that matters at first. You have to kill the old story. Right now, somewhere in your mind, there's a narrative running. It's been running for years. And it sounds something like this. I'm not a morning person, or I'm not disciplined, or I've always been a procrastinator, or I'm just not the kind of person who sticks with things. That story, that's the operating system. That's the code running in the background of every decision you make. And as long as that code is active, no app, no habit tracker, no morning routine is going to override it. You will always default back to the story you tell yourself about who you are. So you have to delete it, not gradually, not gently. You have to look at that story, recognize it for what it is, a lie you've been rehearsing until it felt like truth, and say, that's done. That version of me is dead. Dramatic? Yes. Necessary? Absolutely. Because half measures don't work with identity. You can't be kind of a new person. You can't sort of believe in yourself. You're either in or you're out. You're either the person on the couch or the person building at 10 p.m. There is no middle. Step two, replace the story with a single sentence. Not a paragraph, not a vision board, not 27 affirmations taped to your bathroom mirror. One sentence, one declaration of who you are becoming. Something simple, something clean, something that when you say it creates a little tension in your chest because it's not fully true yet, but it could be. I am the person who uses every hour with intention. I am someone who builds while others sleep. I don't waste time. That's not who I am. Pick one, write it down, and then, and this is the crucial part, start casting votes for that identity immediately. Not tomorrow, not Monday, tonight. One small action that aligns with the new story. One 20-minute block of focused work instead of scrolling. One chapter of a book instead of a Netflix episode. One tutorial instead of a TikTok rabbit hole. The action doesn't have to be big. It has to be aligned. Every aligned action is a vote for the new identity. And over time, those votes add up. They compound, they start to feel natural. And one day, you won't even notice when it happens. You'll realize you haven't scrolled in 3 days. Not because you were resisting, because you forgot. Because that's not who you are anymore. Step three, protect the sacred hours. Remember what I said about the 6 p.m. to midnight window? Those hours are everything. Those are the hours the 1% treats like gold and everyone else treats like garbage. You need to build a wall around those hours. A boundary so strong that nothing gets through. Not Netflix, not social media, not the comfortable pull of just one more episode. You don't need all of those hours, you need 2, maybe even 1. But that 1 hour has to be non-negotiable. It has to be sacred. It has to be the hour where you show up for the person you're becoming, no matter how tired you are, no matter how bad the day was, no matter how loudly your old identity screams at you to sit down and scroll, because here's what happens when you protect that hour consistently. After a week, you feel different, not transformed, just different, like something shifted that you can't quite name. After a month, people start noticing, not because you look different, but because you carry yourself differently. There's something in your eyes that wasn't there before. After 3 months, the results start showing up. The skill is growing, the project is taking shape, the body is changing, the mind is sharper. After 6 months, you won't recognize yourself. And not because you became someone new, but because you finally became who you were supposed to be all along. That's the compound effect of identity-aligned discipline. It doesn't feel like grinding, it feels like becoming. And the gap between where you are and where you want to be gets smaller every single night. Not because you're sprinting, because you're consistent. And consistency, quiet, unglamorous. Nobody is watching consistency beats intensity every single time. Now I want you to feel something. I want you to feel the weight of what I just handed you, because what I described isn't complicated. It's not some sophisticated system that requires a course or a coach or an expensive planner. It's almost painfully simple. And that simplicity is exactly why most people will dismiss it. They'll hear this and think, that can't be it. Changing my life can't be that straightforward. And they'll go back to searching for the perfect morning routine, the perfect app, the perfect hack. They'll keep looking for complexity because complexity feels like effort. And effort feels like progress, but it's not. It's avoidance wearing a productivity mask. The 1% doesn't do more. The 1% does less, but with terrifying focus. They pick one thing, they protect their time, and they show up for it every single day until the world has no choice but to respond. Think about that for a second. Every person you admire, every athlete, every entrepreneur, every creator who built something real, they didn't get there by doing 20 things at once. They got there by doing one thing relentlessly, obsessively. Long after it stopped being fun, long after the motivation wore off, long after everyone around them told them to be realistic, they didn't listen. Not because they were brave, because they couldn't hear it anymore. The noise of other people's opinions gets drowned out when you're locked into your purpose. When your identity is so firmly anchored to what you're building that nothing, not doubt, not criticism, not fatigue, not failure can shake it loose. And you have that in you, right now, right this second. The capacity for that kind of focus, that kind of commitment, that kind of quiet, daily, nobody is clapping for you discipline. It's already inside you. It's been inside you your entire life. You've just been pointing it at the wrong things. You've been disciplined about your distractions, consistent with your consumption, committed to your comfort zone. What if you took that same energy, the same energy that kept you scrolling for 4 hours when you told yourself you'd stop at 30 minutes, and aimed it at something that actually mattered? That energy doesn't come from nowhere. That focus doesn't come from nowhere. You already have it. You've been demonstrating it every single night, just in the wrong direction. So the question isn't, how do I become more disciplined? You're already disciplined. The question is, what am I going to be disciplined about? And that question, that's the one that separates lives. I want to tell you one more thing before we go further. And I want you to really hear this. The shift I'm describing, the identity shift, the sacred hours, the relentless daily vote for the person you're becoming. This doesn't look the way you think it looks from the outside. It doesn't look like some dramatic montage. There's no swelling music. There's no standing ovation. There's no moment where the clouds part and everything suddenly clicks. It looks like sitting at your kitchen table at 10 p.m. when everyone else is asleep, working on something nobody knows about yet. It looks like closing Instagram and opening a blank document and staring at it for 20 minutes before you write a single word. It looks like choosing the hard thing when the easy thing is right there, begging you to come back. It looks lonely. It looks boring. It looks, from the outside, like nothing is happening. But everything is happening under the surface, beneath the quiet, behind the closed door of that kitchen table or that bedroom desk or that corner of the apartment you've turned into a workspace. A life is being rebuilt, brick by brick, night by night, hour by sacred hour, and the world won't see it for a while. Your friends won't understand it. Your family might question it. People will ask why you're not watching the show everyone's talking about, why you're not going out, why you've gotten so serious all of a sudden. Let them ask. Let them wonder. Because you know something they don't. You know that the hours between 6 p.m. and midnight aren't leftover time. They're not scraps. They're the raw material of a completely different life. And you finally decided to stop throwing them away. This is what the 1% looks like in real time. Not glamorous, not exciting, not viral. Just a person alone in a quiet room, building something with hours that used to be wasted, doing the thing that no one applauds for, showing up when there's no audience, casting votes for an identity that doesn't fully exist yet, but gets closer to real with every single night. And something is beginning to stir in you right now. I know it is. Because if you've made it this far, if you're still here, still listening, still feeling that fire building in your chest, then the shift has already started. You can feel it. That old identity is cracking. The new one is pressing against the walls, trying to break through. Don't push it down. Don't rationalize it away. Don't tell yourself, this sounds good, but it won't work for me. That's the old story talking. That's the dead version of you trying to pull you back. You're not going back. But here's what I need you to understand before the final part of this. Everything I've told you so far, the identity shift, the sacred hours, the daily votes, the discipline framework, all of it is the foundation, the blueprint, the structure, and it's powerful. It will change your nights. It will change your mornings. It will change the trajectory of your weeks and months. But there's one more piece, one final layer, that the very top, the absolute peak, the rare 1% of the 1%, understand about time that transforms everything else I've said, from good advice into an unstoppable force. And it has to do with something I haven't mentioned yet, something most people will never discover because they stop right where you are now. They get the identity shift. They protect their hours. They start building. And they're grateful for the progress, but they plateau. They hit a ceiling. They can't explain. They're doing everything right, and yet something is still missing. That something is the difference between someone who uses time well and someone who bends time, who somehow fits more life, more growth, more impact into the same 24 hours than should be humanly possible, who seems to operate on a different clock than the rest of us. It's not a hack, it's not a trick, it's a fundamental shift in how you relate to the minutes themselves. And when you see it, when it finally clicks, you'll understand why some people build empires in the same years that others build nothing. That final piece, that's what comes next. And when I tell you, when I show you what it is and how to use it, you are going to look back on this moment as the exact turning point, the exact place where your old life ended and your new one began. We're almost there. Don't stop now. The people who bend time don't move faster. They don't have secret hours hidden in the day that you don't have access to. They're not superhuman. They're not running on some energy the rest of us weren't given. They burn. That's the difference. That's the final piece. The 1% of the 1% discovered something that changes everything, and it's this. When you attach your hours to a purpose that's bigger than your comfort, time stops being something you endure and becomes something you ignite. Every minute catches fire. Every hour has weight. Every night you sit down to build carries the force of something so deep inside you that exhaustion can't touch it, doubt can't reach it, and distraction doesn't even register. You felt glimpses of this. Think back. There was a time, maybe years ago, maybe recently, when you were working on something and you looked up and 3 hours had vanished. Not wasted, consumed, devoured by focus so intense that the world outside stopped existing. You weren't tired. You weren't bored. You weren't checking your phone. You were gone, lost in the work, lost in the doing, pulled forward by something that felt magnetic. That wasn't accident. That wasn't luck. That was purpose-fused time. And the people who never waste a single hour, they figured out how to live inside that state almost permanently, not by being more disciplined than you, by being more connected to why they're doing what they're doing, to who they're doing it for, to the version of themselves that exists on the other side of the sacrifice. See, most people operate from obligation. They do things because they have to, because the alarm says so, because the boss says so, because the calendar says so. And obligation can get you through a day. It can get you through a week. But obligation cannot build a life. Obligation runs out. It dries up the moment the external pressure disappears. That's why you're productive at work, but useless at home. At work, obligation is everywhere. Deadlines, bosses, consequences. At home, it's just you. And without something internal pulling you forward, the default is always comfort, always the couch, always the scroll. But purpose doesn't care about your schedule. Purpose doesn't wait for the alarm. Purpose is the thing that pulls you off the couch at 10 p.m. when every cell in your body is begging to rest, because the thing you're building matters more than the comfort you're giving up. Purpose is what made Maria sit at that kitchen table night after night. Purpose is what makes the 1% sacrifice hours that everyone else treats as disposable. When your purpose is clear, truly clear, not some vague idea, but a burning, specific, unshakable reason, you don't need willpower. You don't need motivation. You don't even need the identity tricks I taught you in part 2, although those accelerate everything. What you need is what you already have, buried under years of noise and comfort and distraction. You need the fire. And I'm going to show you right now in the next few minutes exactly what that fire looks like when it's fully lit, what it does to a person, what it does to their time, what it does to their entire life. Because this is where it all comes together. Every thread, every lesson, every ounce of tension I've been building. This is where you see the summit. And this is where you decide if you're going to claim it. Let me take you back to Maria. You remember her from part 2? The single mother, 2 kids, the customer service job, the 1,400 nights she lost to her phone before something cracked, and she started building a graphic design business 2 hours at a time. I told you her story up to month 5. 3 paying clients, small jobs, something shifting inside her. I told you she stopped being the woman on the couch and became a designer. But I didn't tell you what happened next. And what happened next is the part that matters most. Because what happened next is where purpose entered the equation and transformed her story from a good self-improvement anecdote into something that will be in your mind when you close your eyes tonight. By month 8, Maria had 12 clients, small business owners, mostly people in her neighborhood, people from Facebook groups, people referred by friends of friends. She was making an extra $1,100 a month. Not enough to quit her job, not enough to change her life in any dramatic, visible way, but enough to feel something she hadn't felt in years. Enough to feel like she was building, like the ground under her feet was no longer shifting. But here's where the fire arrived. One night, month 9, Maria's 7-year-old daughter was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework while Maria worked on a logo design on her laptop across from her. And her daughter looked up and said, "Mama, what are you making?" And Maria said, "I'm designing a logo for a bakery." And her daughter said, "You make things on your computer every night now." And Maria said, "Yeah, I do." And her daughter looked at her with that raw, unfiltered honesty only a child can have and said, "I want to make things too." Maria told me that sentence hit her harder than anything she'd ever heard, harder than any motivational speech, harder than any book or podcast or viral reel. Because in that moment, she realized something she'd never considered before. Her daughter was watching, not just that night, every night. For months, her daughter had watched her go from the woman who scrolled on the couch to the woman who made things at the kitchen table. Her daughter had watched the identity shift happen in real time, And her daughter, without being told, without being lectured, without a single conversation about discipline or dreams or goals, had absorbed it. She'd internalized it. She decided on her own that making things is what people in this house do. That's when Maria's purpose crystallized. Not as words on paper, not as a vision board, as a living, breathing 7-year-old girl sitting across from her at a kitchen table. She wasn't just building a business anymore. She was building a blueprint, a template for her daughter's life. She was showing a little girl through action, through example, through the quiet, repetitive, unglamorous act of showing up every single night that women like them create, women like them build. Women like them don't surrender their hours to a screen. They use them, they invest them, they turn them into something that didn't exist before. And from that night forward, Maria didn't need willpower. She didn't need discipline. She didn't need a morning routine or a habit tracker or an accountability partner. She had something infinitely more powerful. She had a reason that burned so hot it made every other temptation feel ice cold by comparison. Month 12, Maria quit her customer service job. Not because she was making a fortune, she wasn't. She was making about $3,800 a month from freelance work, less than her old salary. But she'd done the math a different way this time. She wasn't calculating money. She was calculating hours. At her old job, she was giving 10 hours a day to someone else's vision. Now every hour was hers, and every hour she invested was building something that would grow, not just for her, but for her daughter and her daughter's daughter. And every woman in her family who would see Maria's life and know that another path existed. By year 2, Maria was running a small design agency, 3 contract designers working under her. Revenue that would have made her old self's jaw drop. But that's not the part of the story that gives me chills. The part that gives me chills is this. Her daughter started a little art business. At 9 years old, she was drawing custom bookmarks and selling them at school for $2 each. She'd set up a shoebox as her register. She had repeat customers. She tracked her income in a notebook. Nobody taught her that. Nobody sat her down and gave her a lecture on entrepreneurship. She just watched her mother, night after night after night, and she became what she saw. That's the power of what you're building when you reclaim your hours. It's not just about you. It was never just about you. Every hour you invest in yourself sends a signal to everyone around you, your children, your partner, your friends, your siblings, the people who watch you quietly and never say a word. That signal says, this is what's possible. This is what someone who looks like me, who comes from where I come from, who has the same constraints I have, this is what they can do. You don't realize you're a lighthouse, but you are. And right now, the light is off. And the people who need to see it, the people who are looking for proof that change is real, that it's possible for someone like them, they're out there in the dark, waiting. Your partner is watching. Maybe not saying anything, but watching. Watching whether you're going to keep talking about change or start living it. Your friends are watching. The ones who are stuck in the same patterns you were stuck in. The ones who are one honest conversation away from their own awakening, but they need to see it work for someone they know before they'll believe it's real. The strangers on the internet who will one day see your work, your project, your business, your transformation. They're watching from a future that hasn't happened yet, waiting for the version of you that decides to show up. Every hour you reclaim sends a ripple. You can't even see. It moves through your household, through your friendships, through your community, through the digital footprint you'll leave behind. And those ripples don't decay, they compound. They build on each other. They reach people you'll never meet, in moments you'll never witness, and change lives you'll never know about. I need to zoom out now, because what I'm about to say extends far beyond your living room, far beyond your career, far beyond any personal goal you've ever set. There is a crisis happening right now, and it's not economic, it's not political, it's not environmental, it's temporal. We are living through the greatest theft of human time in the history of civilization, and most people don't even know they've been robbed. Think about the numbers. A person born today will spend 21 years of their life looking at a screen. 21 years, not creating, not building, not connecting in any real way, just consuming, just absorbing, just watching other people live while their own minutes evaporate. And it's not an accident. The apps are engineered for this. The algorithms are built for this. The notifications, the infinite scroll, the autoplay, the dopamine loops, all of it is designed by teams of brilliant engineers whose entire job is to keep your eyes on their platform for as long as possible. They don't care about your dreams. They don't care about your goals. They don't care about the person you could become if you had those hours back. They care about engagement metrics. They care about ad revenue. They care about keeping you numb enough to keep watching and awake enough to keep clicking. And you've been volunteering for it. Every night, without even realizing you were handing over the most valuable thing you own to people who will never know your name. But here's what excites me. Here's what lights me up and keeps me talking when my voice wants to quit. You're awake now. You're one of the few, the rare ones, the ones who made it through all three parts of this, who sat with the pain and didn't look away, who heard the truth about identity and didn't dismiss it, who felt the fire of purpose and didn't push it down. You're here right now, at this moment. And that puts you in a category that most people will never reach, not because they can't, but because they won't. And what you do next, in the next 24 hours, will determine whether this was just another video you watched or the last day of your old life. So let me tell you what's at stake. Not in theory, in reality, in your actual, lived, irreplaceable life. Every person on this planet gets roughly 25,000 days. That's it. 25,000, not a rough estimate. That's the math on an average human lifespan. 25,000 sunrises, 25,000 chances to build something, love someone, create something that outlasts you. How many have you used? How many are left? If you're 25, you've already spent about 9,000. If you're 35, you spend about 12,000. If you're 45, you're past the halfway mark. And every single day that passes, every day you spend scrolling, consuming, numbing, drifting, is a day that gets subtracted from whatever's left. And it never comes back. It never gets added to the account. It's gone. Permanently. Irreversibly. Done. Now here's the question that should shake you to your core. What are you going to do with the ones that are left? Not all of them. Not some grand plan for the next decade. I'm asking about tonight. I'm asking about the next 2 hours. I'm asking about what happens when this video ends and you're sitting there alone with a choice to make, because that choice, that tiny, seemingly insignificant choice between opening an app and opening a blank page, between watching someone else's life and building your own, that choice is the hinge. That's the door. That's the exact moment where 99% of people turn left and go back to sleep. And the 1% turns right and starts walking toward something that will change everything. So here's what I need you to do. Not want to do, not plan to do, not think about doing. Do tonight, not tomorrow, not this weekend, not when you feel ready. Tonight, you are going to sit down and make a decision about who you are, not who you want to be, not who you hope to become, who you are, starting now. Starting the moment this video ends, you are going to write down one sentence, one declaration of identity. I am the person who, and you're going to finish it with something real, something specific, something that when you read it makes your pulse quicken, because it's not fully true yet, but you can feel in your gut that it could be. And then you're going to do one thing tonight, just one, that casts a vote for that identity. You're going to take 1 hour, maybe even 30 minutes, and you're going to invest it in the person you just declared yourself to be. Read, write, learn, create, practice, build. I don't care what it is, as long as it's aligned with who you've decided you are now, not tomorrow, tonight. Because here's what nobody tells you about change. It doesn't start when you're ready. It starts when you start. Readiness is a myth sold to people who are terrified of beginning. The 1% was never ready. They were scared. They were uncertain. They didn't have a perfect plan. They didn't have all the answers. They had a decision and a first step. That's it. That's all it takes to start building a completely different life. And I know what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking, but I'm tired. I know you are. You're thinking, but I don't know what to work on. Figure it out tonight. That's your first task. You're thinking, but what if I fail? You will. 100 times, 1,000 times. Every person who ever built anything worth having failed so many times they lost count. The difference is they didn't let failure update their identity. They failed and said, that's not who I am. I'm the person who keeps going. And they kept going. You're thinking, but I've tried this before. No. You haven't tried this. You've tried willpower before. You've tried motivation before. You've tried forcing behavior change on top of an unchanged identity. That's not what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to become someone different, to rewrite the story at the deepest level, to stop trying to change what you do and start changing who you are. That's a completely different game. And it's a game you've never played before. So play it. Start tonight. Not with a burst of manic energy that burns out by Friday, with a quiet decision, a calm, clear-eyed commitment to showing up for yourself for 1 hour, in one evening, on one ordinary night, and then doing it again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. Not because you're motivated, because that's who you are now. The person who shows up, the person who builds, the person who treats time like it's the most sacred thing they own, because it is. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to post about it. You don't need anyone's permission or approval or applause. This is between you and the person you're becoming. This is a conversation that happens in silence, in the dark, in the hours nobody sees, and it's the most important conversation you'll ever have. I want to leave you with something. When you press play on this video, you were a different person. I'm not exaggerating. The person who clicked on this, the one who was curious, maybe skeptical, maybe desperate, maybe just looking for something to listen to while they scrolled, that person is already fading. You've been through something in the last hour. Something moved in you. Something shifted. You can try to deny it, but you feel it in your chest, in your stomach, in that place behind your ribs where truth lives. When your mind tries to argue with it, you now know things you can't unknow. You know that time isn't something you manage. It's something you become worthy of. You know that discipline isn't about gritting your teeth. It's about aligning your identity until the right choices feel inevitable. You know that the hours between 6 p.m. and midnight are the most important hours of your life, and that what you do with them will determine everything. You know that every single action is a vote, and the votes compound. And the compound interest of daily identity-aligned action is the most powerful force on the planet. And you know about the fire, the purpose piece, the thing that turns ordinary hours into fuel for something extraordinary. You felt it, maybe for the first time in a long time, stirring inside you, a sense that you were made for more than this, that the life you've been living is a fraction of the life you're capable of, that somewhere inside you, underneath all the noise, and the doubt, and the years of voting for the wrong identity, there is a person who is dangerous, not in a destructive way. Dangerous in the way that people who've stopped wasting time are dangerous. Dangerous to mediocrity, dangerous to comfort, dangerous to every lie you've ever told yourself about what's possible. That person is you, not a future version, you, right now, sitting exactly where you're sitting, with exactly the life you have, with exactly the hours in front of you. And here's what I know about you. Not because I've met you, but because you made it here, to this moment, to this sentence. You didn't click away. You didn't check your phone. You didn't let the old identity pull you back to the scroll. You stayed through the pain, through the mirror, through the shift, through the fire. You stayed. That tells me everything I need to know about what you're capable of. You don't need another video after this. You don't need another book. You don't need another podcast or course or guru. You have everything you need. The knowledge is in you now. The shift has begun. The identity is cracking open. The only thing left is the doing. So tonight, when the house gets quiet and the world goes dark and you're sitting there with 2 hours and a choice, remember Maria. Remember the kitchen table. Remember the little girl who watched her mother build something from nothing and decided without being told, without being taught, that making things is what people in her house do. Remember David. Remember the couch. Remember 1,400 nights that vanished into a screen. Remember the crack. Remember the choice. Remember the 25,000 days. Remember that everyone you've already spent is gone, and everyone you have left is a canvas. And then put the phone down. Open the thing you've been putting off. Sit in the discomfort. Let the first 20 minutes be hard. Let the resistance scream at you. Let the old identity beg you to come back to the couch, to the scroll, to the warm fog of consumption. And don't listen, because you are not that person anymore.